Okay, so good morning, dear colleagues from ELTA. Welcome to the third and final of my training presentations on this topic about EU project management. So this is module 3, Horizon Europe Project Lifecycle, Execution Control and Closing Phases. And this is the agenda I'd like to go through. So I think all told it'll take about an hour to about an hour and a quarter. I'll try my best to keep it closer to an hour. So it's divided into these two parts, and essentially, as you see, it's mainly talking about the first part, about execution and control phase. So I'm going to be covering things like, as much as possible, practical things. So for these Horizon Europe projects, it's always important to have a very good kickoff meeting. So I give a bit of a checklist of what you might want to consider for that. I then talk about regular online project meetings and action item list reviews. Again, some recommendations from my personal experience. I then go on to talk about things like deliverables, milestones, publications, knowledge management, dissemination, communication, exploitation. I then have quite a series of slides talking about periodic reviews. So you have, if it's a 3-year project, you have a midterm review and a final review. These are collectively called periodic reviews. So I'll be covering various topics under that heading. I've got a slide which talks about budget flexibility, which partners often ask me during projects. And then in the sort of last last part of this slides, I'm going to talk a bit about grant amendments because these quite often occur. I'll talk about the most common two that I experience at least, which is the withdrawal of a consortium partner or a grant amendment to extend the project duration. After that, I'll go on and talk about closing phase, which is relatively brief. And then, although not shown here, I have a final slide with some final homeworks for you to do, for those at least who wish to get a certificate. Okay, so let's get started. Execution and control phase. So yes, kickoff meetings, a very important event with these projects. Here's a sort of kind of checklist of things to think about. So project overview and objectives. During this kickoff meeting, it's vital that the coordinator and the partners that they review project goals, the expected impacts and key deliverables. These are of course all documented in the grant agreement, the contract, but frankly speaking, you'll find that many partners, many scientists simply don't look at the grant agreement or don't look that closely. So it's good that this is brought to their attention right at the start. And that helps with the alignment of the partners on the scope, timelines, and intended outcomes. Consortium roles and responsibilities. It's really important during the kickoff meeting to clarify each partner's contributions. And I emphasize it by putting it here in bold. It's really important that partners take ownership for their responsibilities, that they take ownership for their tasks and their work packages. And the kickoff meeting is an important step for that. So clarify communication channels, clarify decision-making processes described in the consortium agreement, work packages and milestones. During the kickoff meeting, get each work package leader to present their work package and tasks. This is important because it helps to sort of nudge the work package leader to take ownership for their work package. And you should ask each of the work package leaders when they present their work package to also discuss in concrete terms what the work activities will be for the first 6 to 12 months relating to deliverables, milestones, etc. As a coordinator, it's good to talk about financial administrative rules, so review funding allocation, eligible costs, reporting requirements. ensure there's a good understanding of the grant agreement and consortium agreement. Now, I've got this bright yellow star on the top right-hand corner. It looks a little bit random, but yeah, again, it's from personal experience with projects. Well before the project officially starts, e.g., already during the contract negotiations, remind the academic partners to recruit their PhD students / postdocs on time. This is so often a problem, so often a delay I find with EU projects, that the academic partners, they've each got their own internal rules and regulations, and people don't really wake up or don't think ahead enough about the delays, the bureaucratic timings that are required for this. And this has a knock-on effect for the whole project. So often you see academic partners where by the time they've actually recruited their PhD or postdoc, the project may have been running for already half a year or at least several months. So this is a good practical one. If you're the coordinator, to nudge the relevant partners on that point. Other things in the checklist, risk management and contingency planning. So review list of critical risks and propose mitigation measures in the grant agreement, because invariably there will be, things don't all go right. And if you have a good critical list and mitigation strategy, that can help address that. Establish a monitoring process to resolve issues. Ethics, data management, and open science. So discuss ethical compliance if you've got especially a healthcare kind of related project. And data protection measures. Review open access requirements and dissemination plans. Communication dissemination strategy. So review the project's communication dissemination exploitation plan and the grant agreement. Identify concrete activities for the first 6 months. So events, project website, social media, getting those set up, getting already news announcements published. And then lastly, next steps and action points, summarize key decisions and responsibilities, set dates for the next meetings and reporting deadlines. So that's the kind of kickoff meeting checklist. But what I'm talking about now with this slide, it's about the regular sort of meetings and about having an action item list review. So my personal recommendation is that it's best to have a weekly online meeting, same day, same time, to review the project's action item list. This is my recommendation. Why do I say that? Well, look, a regular weekly meeting, it becomes a habit. Partners don't need to think what day time it will be at. You don't need to set up a doodle poll each and every time you want a meeting to decide what's the best day. It's this same day, same time. The meeting will typically be only maybe half an hour, 1 hour in duration. However, it can be shorter or longer according to need. What I find is the regularity of these meetings helps to keep partners focused on their tasks and actions in the project. And that's what you really want. The regularity helps ensure partners are made to feel accountable. It's amazing how many partners often suddenly sort of wake up and address the actions, their tasks, the day before or the morning before a Zoom meeting. So that's a welcome thing if you're the coordinator. And then to mention, if you have at least a Zoom business account subscription, and no doubt equivalent things in Teams and other sort of video online platforms. But certainly with Zoom, if you use their AI companion, it will automatically write minutes and actions. So that's very, very helpful. And the other thing, of course, whether you're doing it Zoom or Teams, you can book the meeting into the email calendars of the consortium partners. So again, it's sort of automatically getting nudged. So that is the bullet points on the left. On the right, look, this is an example of a page from sort of an action item list. I had a few years ago, I was the coordinator of a project called Fit for NMP. And we had something like it was a coordination support action. We had about, I think it was 6 work packages. Here I'm just showing sort of the example for work package 2, which is a work package where we had to organize innovation workshops. So in this action item list, what I actually did was I pasted in several things. So at the top, you see the work package distribution for the partners. Now, I did that because I wanted both them and myself to have a clear idea which partners involved in this work package, and therefore, who has person months and therefore should be contributing. That was one thing. And then underneath that, I copied and pasted the performance indicators, the KPIs relevant to that particular work package. And you'll see on the right, there's a bit where it says final target and then current total. So the final target, this is the final target indicated in the grant agreement, and the current total was where we were at. And very basic thing, if we hadn't yet reached the final target, I would highlight everything in yellow. So it's a kind of a way to kind of make the thing leap out and try and keep us focused on what we need to get, what we need to achieve. So those are those 2 tables, and below it, you've got the table showing the actual concrete actions. So I've not shown all the actions, but I give this just as an example. This is something that I did. I'd say, yeah, with this Fit for NMP project, we were meeting, I think, Friday afternoons at about 2 or 3 o'clock, and it was very, very effective. Yeah. So moving on, some words about deliverables. So again, I'm talking from the point of view of project management, coordination. What is a very good thing to do is to have standardized deliverable templates for your partners to use. So the ones you see here, this is from the QRC for ESP projects, which ELTA is a partner in. On the template, you see the logo, you see the official sort of name, etc., etc. But anyway, it's good to have a template and that these are accessible to the partners. But here in the yellow bubble, what I'm saying is, as the project manager, you're always got to be thinking ahead, making sure partners are working on their necessary tasks. So in the case of deliverables, I find it's a very good thing to send an email 2 or 3 months before the due date for a deliverable to the responsible partner, and just sort of give them a gentle nudge and sort of say, oh, how's it going with the deliverable, which is due by, I know, 30th of April or whatever, yeah. Still on deliverables, another good thing to do is to have some sort of quality control schedule to review draft deliverables. In other words, allocate partners to review each other's deliverables. So this table you see here, this is from a project I had some years ago under Horizon 2020 called CIFIS Home. And what you see is the list of the deliverables, who's the lead beneficiary, in other words, who's the lead partner responsible for the deliverable. But later on, the later columns, where you see, say, the second to last column, partner deliverable reviewers. These are the partners who were supposed to be, who were allocated to check the draft deliverables. And you see the dates by which they're supposed to be provided copies and by which they're supposed to have completed their reviews. So this is just a way to try to help improve the quality of the deliverables that get submitted. When deliverable is completed, where does it get submitted? Well, the European Commission on their funding and tenders portal, they have a section called Sigma, System for Grant Management, and it's within there that you submit the deliverables. And this screenshot you see This is from the QRC for ESP projects. You can see, I've sort of set up so you can see the first deliverables that we had and the most recent ones. There'll be a similar kind of screen like this for the Quest project. Now, what else about deliverables? Well, often the Commission is very keen that as many deliverables as possible are public deliverables. In other words, because these projects are funded by public taxpayers' money, the feeling is that the public should, as much as possible, gain a benefit. Now, public deliverables in Horizon Europe projects, they are made available for download from the European Commission's Cordis project database. This QR code that you see, this will take you to the Cordis project database. Now, I'm flagging this, raising this to you because this is obviously a chance to learn how other projects write their deliverables. This can be especially helpful to understand how to produce deliverables required in all Horizon Europe projects. So there's always a deliverable about project website and promotion materials, data management plan, dissemination communication, execution plan. Often projects have gender plans and so on and so forth. And so on the right-hand side of the screen, this is just an example. I went into the Cordis project database, and since Quest project is a twinning project, I thought, well, let's have a look on another twinning project. And I picked up this this one here, Twinning to Build an Industrial Ecosystem Around the Core Principles of Industry 4.0 and the Digital Twin. And I eventually pressed on a section called Results, and hey presto, it shows me the list of deliverables. So there's a gender equality plan, digital twins, best practice, dissemination, exploit, etc., etc. And I can download any of those. So this is a basically what I'm saying is, learn from the best. Go and have a look at if you're involved in the twinning project. Go and have a look at all the twinning projects that are on the database. See what interesting deliverables there are. Moving away from deliverables to milestones. So as for so many things, milestone completion is recorded in Sigma. Again, this screenshot, this is from the QRC for ESP project. So you get a basic idea of where we're up to date with our milestones. I think our next one is only not due until the end of 2025. So we're doing well there. Publications. Obviously, the production of publications, journal articles, conference papers is an important output in EU-funded research projects. It's essential for it's essential to acknowledge Horizon Europe funding in those journal articles and conference papers, which are based on research results from a Horizon Europe project. You should check the grant agreement for your project. There's an article 17.2, but also check with the project officer at the Commission to know what formal statements should be used, because the wording may change over time. Anyway, currently the formal statement that we can use in the Quest project is either one of these. In our case, the European Commission project officer was checked. These statements were sort of put in an email and sent to him and asked, is it okay to use these? And basically we were given the thumbs up that that's okay. When there are publications, these also need to be recorded in Sigma. Again, this is a screenshot from QRC for ESP project. In this case, we've only got the one journal article for the moment, but the project's only been running for a year, and most of the journal articles will be coming in the second and final year of the project. Some words about knowledge management. So You have to prepare a deliverable on data management plan according to the European Commission's templates. The QR code here on the right, this will take you directly to where you can download that European Commission template. Anyway, in this data management plan, you need to define the categories of data to be collected, generated, used, and processed. These are sort of the 7 different categories that you typically see. On knowledge management, of course, you'll need to set up some sort of cloud storage and file sharing facility to share files, data, deliverables between the partners. There are various ones out there. They all have their pluses and minuses. MS Teams, MS SharePoint, Dropbox, Google Drive, to mention just a few. Within that cloud storage, I recommend that you set up folders according to work packages, meetings, etc. Here on the right, you can see the simple folder structure that's sort of being used for Quest project. On the subject of dissemination, communication, exploitation, so within your grant agreement, you'll have some sort of preliminary plan. Most of the time, it's sort of presented as a table. This example you see here, this is from the QRC for ESP project. So this is like a sort of summary table at a high level. What I've done though is with the table is, because we just recently had the year 1 periodic review with the Commission. So I took the table and I added an extra column on the right-hand side. And I've just basically tracked to say, look, at the end of period 1, this is where we are with all these different indicators. So this is a good thing to do, and maybe track not just once a year, but on a pretty regular basis. So that table, if you like, is a sort of on an aggregate, high-level summary of dissemination, communication, exploitation. It's also important, though, that you keep track on at a lower level, a more sort of granular level. So what I recommend is that you set up an Excel file to track the details of all the different types of dissemination, communication, exploitation activities that are done by the partners. Again, this is an example from QRC for ESP. What I do is every few months is I kind of send it around to the partners and I get them to update it. We now sort of move on to talk about move on to talk about sort of periodic reporting. So firstly, I want to say some words about the occurrence, purpose, and reporting. So occurrence. So Horizon Europe projects of 2 to 3 years in duration, they're divided into 2 periods, period 1 and period 2. Periods of longer duration have additional periods. So maybe, for example, if you had a 5-year project, you probably have 3 periods, and so on. The purpose of these is manifold. So it's to assess the project progress. Purpose is to evaluate whether the project is meeting its objectives, milestones, and deliverables as planned. It's there to ensure compliance. Purpose is to verify adherence to Horizon Europe funding rules, ethical guidelines, and contractual obligations. Monitor budget and resources. The purpose is to review financial expenditures and resource allocation to ensure efficient use of funds. Identify risks and challenges. So the purpose is to detect potential risks, delays, or deviations, and propose corrective actions if needed. Facilitate communication. The purpose is to provide an opportunity for beneficiaries and the European Commission to discuss findings, feedback, and future steps. Now, for the reporting at these periodic, at the end of period 1, the end of period 2, if you like, there's 3 parts, there's 3 reports. There's the technical report part A, which in essence comprises of online forms to be completed in Sigma, covers things like the project summary, status with regard to critical risks, milestones, publications, dissemination activities, etc. There's a technical report part B, also commonly referred to as the periodic management reports. The technical report provides a comprehensive overview on project progress, project objectives, achievements, deviations, impacts, including scientific and innovation-related progress. The technical report also provides explanations of work performed for each work package, use of resources, risk management, and compliance with EC requirements supported by deliverables and milestones. Thirdly, you have the financial report. But here we need to make an important distinction between financial statements or financial reports for lump sum funded projects and those for actual cost funded projects. So in the case of lump sum funded projects, as has already been mentioned in the previous training presentation, financial statements here confirm the percentage completion of work packages rather than detailing actual incurred costs, thereby, at least in theory, simplifying financial reporting. On the other hand, actual cost-funded projects, the financial statement provides a breakdown of actual incurred costs, including personnel, travel, equipment, and subcontracting, ensuring they align with the project's budget and Horizon Europe rules. Now, on the right-hand side, in the top right-hand corner, you see this QR code. If you were to go on that, it will take you to this document periodic report. So this is like the Commission's document with guidelines, explanation about the requirements for these 3 different reports. And it's important that you make sure you have the latest copy. I believe the latest version is version 1.1 from the 1st of May 2023. But if you every time you come to the end of a period, it's always best to double check that you have the latest version. So look, now I'm not going to really dwell too much about the technical part A. I mean, in some respects, I've already covered that with earlier slides when I talked about how to fill in about deliverables and milestones. In some ways, more importantly, more arduous, more difficult is the preparation of the technical report part B. On this slide, it's rather packed. I do apologize, but I couldn't really find an alternative way. But what I'm showing you is some of the pages from the part B from my Fit for NMP project, which I had a few years ago. So these are some of the pages at the end of period 1, and I've not shown all the pages because the whole report was like 49. It would take forever, but I just want to highlight a few features, a few things that you might want to consider if you are responsible for preparing such a technical report. So starting from the left, here there's near the start of these periodic reports, you have to state what were the objectives, what are the objectives for the project, and in essence, what's the progress. Now, against each of those objectives. Now, the Commission is looking for you to give a mixture of a sort of qualitative and quantitative assessment on those objectives. So, if you like, on the quantitative level, this table here you see in the slide, the first page, this is just a very, very simple sort of statement. So what I've done is, or what I did rather, you see the work packages that we had in this project: work package 1, work package 2, work package 3. And if you hopefully recall from a previous training, I had this thing about saying, look, make sure that your work packages align with the objectives for your project. So that objective 1 maps to work package 1 and so on and so forth. So here's one of the simple benefits, because Now, when you're doing the reporting, yeah, you can put a simple table like this. You list the work packages. Those work packages have, sub-objectives, and you just go through and say, look, at the end of period 1, is it completed or is it ongoing? You fill out the table. Moving on to the pages in the middle of the slide and to the right, what I'm doing here is I'm trying to give you an example of the type of text to write for a work package. So for each of the work packages, you have to sort of go into more detail and sort of give a status report, if you like. So what I would typically do is, this is showing for work package 1. I would copy and paste the sub-objectives from the grant agreement, the Annex 1. Then underneath that, I would have in bullet form what considered to be the main achievements during that past period. Then below that, I would show the performance indicators. What are the final targets? Where are we at currently at the end of period 1, or if it's the end of the project? And then afterwards would actually give a sort of qualitative, concise description of the progress for each of the different tasks. So I haven't shown all the write-up for all the tasks. It's not necessary. But at the end of this sort of section about work package 1, and indeed for all the work packages, I would have a simple table where I would, for each of the partners involved in that work package, they would have to write some concise text saying what exactly they did. In other words, helping to justify why they booked their person months, their costs for that work package. Now, still on this technical report part B, because it's such an important document, I wanted to also give an example of some of the other sections. So there's a section 5 in these reports where it says deviations from Annex 1 and Annex 2. Now, I'll put it politely. The Commission is pretty obsessed about deviations. Deviations in efforts, in other words, person months, deviations in delivery, meeting a due date or not, perceived deviations in costs being claimed against budget, all manner of deviations. And of course, the question then becomes, well, when is something a deviation? When is it not? It's easy to pose the question. It's not so easy to give the answer. But at any rate, look here in this example, a very real example with Fit for NMP. We got to the end of period 1, and on the level of tasks, we were a bit late, or rather late, I think, with some of our deliverables. And this part of this project was also going on during COVID, so we had some problems with I think the implementation of some of the events. So anyway, this section 5.1, we wrote very concisely and tried to give a short reason why something was late. This is something that you should consider, think about in your report. Then looking at the page 5 on the right-hand side of the slide, there's section 5.2 where you need to describe the resources that are used. And in terms of resources, there's what are called efforts, or in other words, person months. You need to report on that. And then you'll see on the next slide, you need to also report on resources in terms of cost. So anyway, for efforts and person months, the classic thing to do is to put in a table like this, where you show for each of the work packages, each of the partners, what's been their actual consumption of person months during the reporting period versus what was the amount planned for that period. Now, it's good to do a table, but don't only do a table, because obviously it's quite difficult in some ways to read a table. Also, what I do is I create these simple sort of bar charts, and they help to illustrate much more quickly and more simply where there may or may not be deviations. And of course, if there are any deviations, write some concise explanations. So I think, what do we see here with this project? Well, it mentions nearly 20% more person months were booked to work package 1 than originally planned for period 1. But this was due to the consortium's efforts to identify and register talented newcomers early in the project. Otherwise, for the other work packages, the actual person months booked were comparable to those planned for period 1. This short explanation was sufficient for the project officer and also for the reviewers at the midterm review. On this slide, again, I apologize, it looks so busy with these pages, but the first 2 pages, the one on the left and one in the middle, this is still in this section, sort of 5.2, talking about resources, but now it's about costs. So again, what's the typical thing to do? I recommend that you create an Excel file where you basically show, look, these are the budgets different partners have in the consortium, budgets for the whole project. And this is the actual expenditure they've had at, say, at the end of period 1. Yeah, for personnel costs or other direct costs or whatever. Yeah. Now, 90, again, like with efforts, don't only produce, say, this table, but create some kind of simple bar chart where it's easy to sort of see where the deviations are. And again, if there is any significance, give some justification. So I think if you look on the middle page, apologize it's so small. Oh, by the way, I mean, obviously you'll be getting PDF versions of this slide, so you'll be able to enlarge things if you're really interested. But with the cost, I think with our project, as I say, it was during COVID-19, so there was very little travel going on. So we had our actual other direct costs were low during period 1. Now, despite your very best efforts to produce an excellent technical report, part B, and explain as much as possible deviations, despite all that, it's very common during the review, the midterm review or the final review, that the reviewers or people in the commission, it might be the financial officers or whoever, it's very common that they come back and they ask for further explanations. And this one demonstrating on this last page on the right-hand side, indeed, that's what we had. You can just about see it says responses to the EC's questions on the suspension of payment letter dated the 4th of October 2022. So we'd had an excellent midterm review. This technical part B was largely praised and we got good feedback, but nevertheless, our financial statements for some of the partners, including my company, we were asked to give more explanations. And so, for example, here I had the EC's question to Int, that's my company, could you please explain the high deviation of the direct personnel costs declared as actual costs? I'm not going to read it all there, but I basically had to go into detail about why we had booked more efforts, more person months to various work packages. I say this is a common thing. Okay, moving away from technical part B to the financial reporting. So financial reporting needs to be done at the end of each project period. We already mentioned that. Usually projects have 2 periods, period 1 and 2. They can have more periods in case of projects of longer duration. Financial reports, in brackets online financial statements, must be submitted by each beneficiary, in other words, consortium partner, within 60 days of the end of the project period. I'm not sure if I mentioned it on the slide, but I'm reminded of that now. So at the end of a project period, if it's a 3-year project, it's typically, say, at the end of month 18. There's 60 days. There's 2 months by which you have to get all these technical reports submitted to the portal, and your partners need to have all submitted their financial statements. Now, that's often a challenge. There's usually some partners that are struggling to get their financial statements in time. Often this is because they simply don't start looking at it until a bit like the last minute. So as a project coordinator or project manager, my recommendation would be, as soon as you get to the end of a project period, the end of say month 18, don't wait until near the end of the 60 days before you contact the partners about their financial statements. No, send an email to their project financial signatories, right at the start of the 2 months, and give them a nudge and tell them, in fact, look, please get it done not within 60 days, but within 45 days. Okay, anyway, there's a distinction between financial reporting for lump sum grants and actual cost grants. Also known as reimbursement grants. So let's talk a bit about lump sum funding. Okay, financial reporting involves indicating the work packages that have been completed in an online form on the European Commission's funding and tender portal. Interim payments reimburse the eligible lump sum contributions claimed only for completed work packages implemented during the respective reporting periods. The European Commission has said that financial audits will not be conducted for such projects because actual costs are not reported in lump sum projects. However, the dedicated lump sum grant agreement still includes the option of financial audits like any other project under Horizon Europe. And it indicates that lump sum beneficiaries are required to keep a so-called adequate level of records, in brackets, presented officially in contrast to the actual cost model requirements. Moving on to actual cost funding. So, as we've already mentioned before, financial reporting is done by completing an online form on the European Commission's funding and tender portal. Interim payments reimburse the eligible actual costs claimed during the respective reporting periods. This next slide, this screen here, this is what you would see. This is the financial statement you would see if you had an actual cost funded project, and this is the financial statement you would see at the end of the period. So you've got all these different categories: personnel costs, subcontracting costs, other costs, so on and so forth. What to note? Well, on the right, I've highlighted in red. Important. Remember to complete descriptions of costs where required, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Then this bright yellow star at the top, that's in essence repeating what I mentioned just a moment ago. It's don't wait. If you're the project coordinator, project manager, don't wait till the end of the 60 days before you start contacting the partners' project financial signatories. The project's partners, well, let me just use the acronym, it's easy to say, PF signs. The PF signs are the ones who have the authorization to electronically sign the financial statement. So it's a good practice to, as soon as the period is over, email all of them and tell them, look, get it done within 45 days, and use the justification, which is a very valid one. Tell them that you need their financial statements completed within 45 days, not 60 days, because you need to put that financial information also into the technical report part B, and you need to prepare those Excel files, those tables, those bar charts, etc. So some more words about, this is still on the topic of actual cost funded projects. So you've got all these different cost categories: personnel costs, subcontracting costs. So here's some more words. So personnel costs. How these are calculated, it's the daily rate multiplied by the days worked on the project. How do you calculate the daily rate? The daily rate is the actual annual personnel costs for the person divided by 250. People often ask, how do you convert hours into person months? because of course people are doing timesheets and those timesheets say hours. Here, the sort of standard thing to do is take the hours, divide them by 1,720 and then by 12, which is effectively take the hours and simply divide by 143.33. That's a sort of conversion factor into person months. Now, why is this important to know and to do? It's because if we go back to this slide here, on the right-hand side, I said, oh, you remember you need to complete descriptions of costs. Well, in the case of personnel costs, you have to put down the number of person months booked to each of the different work packages. So this is why you need to be able to know how to do this conversion from hours to person months. Subcontracting costs. So in the case of subcontracting costs, which again, yeah, it's going to be, if you have any, so I'm going back to the slide here, on the right-hand side, if you do have any subcontracting costs, you'll have to give some description. And these are the things that you'll need to give. You'll need to give the name of the contractor, the service provided, the amount of the invoice, the date of the invoice, and reference the section in Part B, brackets description of action of the grant agreement, where the project will have subcontracting costs described. So it might sound obvious, but there's always often, you still see mistakes. If you're going to be claiming subcontracting costs, the date of the invoice needs to fall within the dates of the project period. It can't be before, it can't be after. It won't be valid, yeah? This bit where it says reference a section in Part B. So normally, in your grant agreement, in your proposal, you should have already described, if you're going to have subcontracting, you should describe the budget and what the budget for subcontracting is going to be for. And by referencing in your description, it makes it easier for the financial officers to basically approve the cost claim. Other costs that you'll need to sort of provide some sort of description, or you need to know how to do. Purchase costs. Now, the important thing here is the description is only required for purchase costs if the total amount of those purchase costs exceeds 15% of the total personnel costs. The description is only required for the amount above the 15% limit. So let's imagine if you had a project where at the end of period one, your total purchase cost was 16,000 euros and the total personnel costs were 100,000 euros. Well, then your 15% limit would be 15% of 100,000, so it's 15,000 euros. So in other words, your total purchase costs, they only exceeded the 15,000 by 1,000. So in other words, in that instance, you're only going to have to give a description of purchase costs for at least 1,000 euros. Yeah, you don't need to give them for all 16,000. And out of those 16, this hypothetical situation, out of those 16,000 euros, the 1,000 euros of cost that you choose to describe is exactly that. It's for you to decide which ones you want to describe. So often the easiest one to describe is travel and subsistence costs, which is the next bullet on this slide. So in the case of travel and subsistence costs, if you're describing those, you need to remember the following. You need to give the names of the experts, the destination where they went to, the dates of the trip, the purpose of the trip, and reference the work package / task to which the trip relates to. If you do all those things, and by the way, of course, the dates of the trip need to fall within the dates of the period. If you do all those things, it'll go through very smoothly with the financial officer. Equipment costs. So if you have those, you need to indicate the name of the supplier, the name of the equipment, the amount of the invoice, the date of the invoice, indicate the amount of the depreciation over the reporting period. So you have to remember it's the depreciation that you can claim. And again, if you have such a cost, make sure you reference the section in the Part B of your grant agreement where it is indicated the project would have equipment costs. Other goods, for example, research consumables, chemicals, computer licenses, etc. Here, if you're claiming those, indicate the name of the supplier, the name of the goods, the amount of the invoice, the date of the invoice, and reference the section in Part B. Works and services, for example, catering, that's the classic one. If you're holding your project holds some project meetings or workshops or conferences, indicate the name of the supplier, the name of the service, the amount of the invoice, date of the invoice, and again, reference the section in the Part B. Other cost categories, in brackets, internally invoiced goods and services. I don't think this happens too often on projects, but sometimes it does. The things you need to reference, the name of the supplier, the service provided, the amount of the invoice, the date of the invoice, and the reference in the section of the Part B. So, last slide about financial reporting. Okay, I'm going to read the text and the bullet points. So, certificate on the financial statement, in brackets CFS, in other words, the audit certificate. These are required at the end of the project for each beneficiary whose total eligible costs exceed €430,000. So it all depends on the project, of course. Many partners won't have total eligible costs that exceed 430. By total eligible costs, we mean the sum of the direct costs and indirect costs. Many partners won't have costs exceeding this threshold, so they don't need to worry about a certificate on their financial statement. They don't need an audit certificate. On the other hand, many projects, you do have partners that exceed this. So that means at the end of the project, they're going to need to get this audit certificate. And this audit, the things to be careful here. So for example, if we consider the Quest project, ELTA at the end, ELTA has a budget in excess of €430,000, and assuming they claim costs in excess of that, they'll need to have this audit certificate, Now, this audit certificate, it has to follow very specific terms of reference as a model. The QR code on the right, that will take you to where you can download that model. And again, as I often say with other documents, make sure you got the latest copy because they do get updated from time to time. And if you yourselves or you've got partners who you know they're going to have these audit certificates, here I'm looking at the yellow star, bright star at the top of the slide. 2 to 3 months before the official end of the project, remind the partners with budgets in excess of €430,000 to contract an accounting firm to audit their financial statement as soon as the project ends. If you're the coordinator or the project manager, don't wait until the project ends to then only then start contacting relevant partners and saying, oh, are you sorting out your audit certificate? Think in advance, because especially if they're public organizations, universities, academic institutions, they have to go through some kind of tendering process or something like that in order to arrange an auditor. It all takes time, time which is very precious, because remember, at the end of the project period, you got a time limit of 60 days to get everything, the technical reports completed, and the financial statements. And if you've also got factored into that the need to get these audit certificates, you can start to see how 60 days doesn't seem like that much. So as coordinator, project manager, think ahead. nudge the partners to get working on that as soon as possible. So we talked a lot. I talked a lot about the reporting to be done at the end of the period. You know, the technical report part A, part B, financial statements. Of course, not only do you have these periodic management reports, you'll also typically have a project review meeting. So, and I'm going to step through the bullet points on the left. So, usually required to present the project's progress at a project review meeting about 2 months after the end of a project period. This review is done by the EC project officer with the support of between 1 to 3 independent reviewers, also known as independent experts, also known as reviewers. These project review meetings are done online. Before the whole COVID-19 pandemic, they were often held in Brussels. The European Commission project officer will usually ask you to propose an agenda. She or he will ask the coordinator for an agenda for either a half day, brackets, that's the typical duration for a coordination support action, or a full day, brackets, research innovation actions, for the project review meeting. See adjacent example for a CSA. So here on the right, this was the agenda that we had at the midterm review for the Fit for NMP project. It's a pretty simple agenda and it lasted an afternoon. I put it there so you've kind of got an example, you know, come the time for quests, we may have something similar. Again, from the point of view of being the coordinator or project manager for this, if you're preparing for the project review meeting, and I'm looking now at the bullet points again on the left, ensure the work package leaders use a standardized slide presentation template. Your consortium will look a whole lot more professional if you have a standard set of slides covering the standard set of information for the different work packages. The other thing to mention is once your work package leaders, they prepared their slides, in fact, before they even prepare them, tell them, look, what information they're presenting in the slides, it needs to be somehow consistent and coherent with what is being reported in the technical report part B for that work package. You don't want a sort of divergent story there. Make sure the consortium holds a practice dress rehearsal, the review meeting before the actual review. So, you know, maybe a few days or a week or more, have an online meeting with the consortium, get the work package leaders to present their slides, and then the other partners should pretend to be at the end of the presentation of the slides, they should pretend to be the reviewers and ask the work package leaders challenging questions. So this is a good thing to do to obviously help you be best prepared for the review meeting. So that's enough about periodic technical reports, financial statements, periodic review meetings. Since we've been sort of talking about budget and so forth, this seems an opportune time to talk about budget flexibility. So consortium partners in projects I'm involved in, they often ask me if they can transfer budget between cost categories. You know, for example, can they transfer budget from travel costs to personnel costs? I just realised I have to apologise. I got a bit of a mistake on this slide. I have to correct it afterwards. But in I'm meant to be describing this slide both the case for actual costs and then for lump sum. So anyway, in the second bullet point, it says for Horizon Europe actual cost funded projects. So in those cases, can you transfer budget between cost categories? And the answer is yes. You can do that without a grant amendment, provided Article 5.5 of the grant agreement is respected. Note that one can make transfers between budget categories and also between partners. Note that Article 5.4 refers to estimated budget. Now, at this point, don't please look at the bullet point below, but look to the right of the screen. On the right of the screen, I've copied, this is some part of the page from the grant agreement from Horizon Europe project. Look at the point where it says 5.5 budget flexibility. This is the official, this is the legal reference that gives you that flexibility, that allows you to transfer budget between participants and budget categories. Yeah. So often when consulting partners say, "Can I move budget?" I'm right back and say, yes, refer to Article 5.5 in the grant agreement. That's all fine and well for actual cost funded projects. And this is where I have a mistake. I apologize on my slide. On the last bullet point, it says Horizon Europe actual cost funded projects. It should actually say for Horizon Europe lump sum funded projects. For lump sum funded projects, you can't transfer budget between cost categories just like that. It would require a grant amendment. But hang on a moment, it's a lump sum funded project. So there's no real need to transfer, I would say, normally between budget categories, between personnel costs and travel or whatever, because it's a lump sum. What's the point? Maybe in a particular instance, you might need to transfer budget between partners. If that's really, really the case, you'll have to do it via a grant amendment. You don't have that budget flexibility. I apologize for that mistake. I'll correct it before I give Dora the PDF of these slides. Grant amendments. This is an important occurrence if you're a project coordinator, project manager. You often have these or requests for these. On this slide, I give some of the main reasons. So what are the main reasons? It could be changing the consortium composition, withdrawing or adding a beneficiary, affiliated entity or associated partner, extension of project duration, requesting additional time due to unforeseen delays or force majeure, modification of the work plan, updating deliverables, milestones or tasks due to scientific or technical reasons, budget and cost reallocation, adjusting budget distribution between beneficiaries or cost categories. Change of legal or financial status, updated details if a beneficiary undergoes a legal name change, merges or faces financial issues. So let me go through a bit of the practicalities for probably the most common two examples of grant amendments. So the withdrawal of a consulting partner. If you have this situation, so you need to initiate the request in the funding and tenders portal. The coordinator or the withdrawing partner submits what's called a termination request through the grant management system. There'll be a need to provide a justification and supporting documents. So the request must include a clear reason for termination, potential impacts on the project and relevant supporting documents, e.g. consortium agreement, justification letter. You need to update the grant agreement and work plan. The consortium must propose necessary amendments to redistribute the departing partners' remaining tasks and budget, ensuring project continuity. There needs to be a formal approval by the European Commission. The EC reviews the request, assessing risk, project viability before approving or rejecting the termination. Formalization of the termination. If approved, the grant agreement is amended and the termination is officially recorded, including final cost claims and reporting for the withdrawing partner. Now, I don't have a bullet mentioning this on the slide, but I was thinking about it just now. I mean, if you're in any of these situations where you need to do a grant amendment on a practical level, it's a good idea to inform before you start the formal process. It's a good idea to inform the European Commission project officer of your need to do the grant amendment and to give it a reason by email. Yeah, and they appreciate to know a bit in advance. So the other very common reason for grant amendments is usually about extending the project duration. How does this process go? So like before, initiate the amendment request in the funding and tenders portal. This is done by the project coordinator. Provide justification. So there's a bit in the online portal where you have to write this explanation, outline the reasons for the extension, e.g. delays, unforeseen circumstances, technical challenges, and the risk of not passing project milestones. Now, I've highlighted that in bold because my experience, my impression is you're much more likely, especially if you're asking for project duration, because quite often the Commission can be allergic to these kinds of requests. You're much more likely to have a request approved if you're able to say, look, if we don't have the project extended, this milestone 3 or 4, whatever it is that's listed in your grant agreement, you're saying, look, we're at risk of failing to complete that. That would seem to be often a persuasive argument for the Commission. Anyway, assuming you provide a justification, update the grant agreement and work plan. The revised timeline must be reflected in the project's deliverables, milestones, reporting schedule. If you're asking for a project extension, usually the Commission, if they allow it, they'll only allow a 6-month extension. When we had COVID, that was the only time I've ever known personally where projects have been allowed to be extended by a year. Consortium agreement and partner approval. The applicable consortium partners must agree on the extension before the submission. Yes, of course. European Commission review and approval. The EC assesses the request, ensuring project feasibility and funding implications before approving or rejecting the amendment. Formalization of the amendment. If approved, the updated grant agreement is signed electronically and the new project timeline is officially recorded. So I've done all about execution control phase. Hurrah, we're at the closing phase. I've just got 2 slides on this, and in a way it's kind of repetition from going back to module 1 and what was said there. So what are the things to consider in closing phase? Final reporting deliverables. Submit the final technical and financial reports via Sigma because it's the end of the period. Ensure all deliverables and milestones are completed and documented. Financial closure, submit final cost claims and justifications of expenditures, ensure compliance with eligibility rules and audit requirements. We covered that in earlier slides this morning. Review and assessment, participate in the final project review with the European Commission or external evaluators, address any feedback or additional requests from the EC. Dissemination and exploitation, finalize and publish project results, data sets, and scientific publications. That's really, really important. Making sure that Sigma is up to date with all of the publications. That's always a bit of a challenge. Ensure long-term sustainability and exploitation of project outcomes. And then lastly, intellectual property and data management, finalize agreements on intellectual property rights and data sharing if it's relevant. Ensure compliance with open science and fair data principles. Archive record keeping, maintain project records for at least 5 years or as required by the European Commission. Check what's written in the grant agreement. Ensure availability of documents for potential audits or reviews. Project closure and next steps. So officially close the project in the funding and tenders portal. Plan follow-up initiatives, collaborations or funding applications. Write up a learning log on what went well, what didn't. And other advice for future projects. So that's very briefly about the closing phase, very, very briefly. Now, I come to my very last slide about the final homework towards receiving a certificate of project management. Now, I have to say, initially I was kind of scratching my head thinking, what would make sense for a homework for this third module, because in some ways it's a bit tricky. How can you set a homework which, when you look at what execution control is, it's all about a running project. Of course it is. It's about, you know, things like the periodic reports, the financial statements. It's a bit difficult to sort of set a homework on that when you don't actually have a run project to refer to. So instead, what I realized is, and it's my bad, the only time during these three modules where I've referenced about AI, artificial intelligence, was today. I said about when you do regular meetings, hopefully weekly meetings, if you're using Zoom, they have AI Companion, and that can automatically write summary notes and actions from the meetings and how useful this is. But of course, AI, generative AI, I haven't mentioned it in other trainings, and in a way, it's almost been like the elephant. We say in English, the elephant in the room. It's the thing which, whether you're involved in proposal writing or project administration, it has such an incredible potential to transform the way we do things. And anyway, to address that, I thought, well, and I think the other reason why perhaps I haven't spoken really about it is because I'm trying to figure out myself, to be honest, how best to use it. I think I don't consider myself an expert in this field of using generative AI at all. I think I'm more of a tinkerer of using it. And I suspect perhaps you yourselves, my audience, you quite possibly have more experience than I do. So in a bit in that vein, in the vein of trying to bring your attention, if you don't use it yet, to get you thinking about using it, or if you are already using it, helping inform me how I can perhaps use it myself in future. This is why we got the following homework. So look, homework assignment, generative AI in proposal writing and project administration for Horizon Europe. So please prepare a short report, 400 to 600 words, covering the following two areas. So generative AI for proposal writing, explain how AI tools such as ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Copilot, whatever, how they can assist in proposal writing. But also say, not only identify what the key benefits could be, but also challenges, and are there any ethical considerations? Similarly, generative AI for project administration, describe how AI tools can support project administrative tasks and identify key benefits, challenges, and ethical considerations. Assuming you're doing this homework, I would be very grateful if you could email it to me, to this email address, and please send it to me by the 7th of April at the latest.